In this video, you're going to see a step-by-step assembly of a differential, done by experts with decades of experience.
Nearly 7.
That's lovely. That's really good. That's right on spec.
We'll go through all the tips and tricks to get everything right.
Toe and heel, move the wheel.
And how to handle curveballs you won't see until you are deep in the build.
Good. See how we go.
So you don't end up with a noisy, clunky diff that could implode at any time.
Technically speaking, this is not an implosion. However, based on extensive research, 1-minute Google search, we've determined that explosions generate 27% more engagement than implosions. Rest assured, no differentials were actually harmed in the making of this video, we think.
By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to build a differential and how it all works. And stick around, because at the end of this video, something totally unexpected happened.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't expect that.
No.
But more on that soon. Last time, we tore this thing down. We assessed the damage, found some problems.
That's not a good sound.
That didn't sound good.
And of course, there were a few shenanigans along the way.
If I get this wrong and you hit something, it's not my fault.
My head's hanging off the end, please don't.
We had some heart-stopping moments.
Oh.
But there was one problem left to solve. And that's where this guy comes in.
Hey Phil, how's it going?
Morning, James. How you going?
Yeah, good mate.
I'm on my way to PDR differentials in Geelong. For those outside of Australia, Geelong is a mid-sized city, about an hour southwest of Melbourne, and about 40 minutes from where I live. Geelong is a city of about 276,000 people, but it has a big car scene and a long history of automotive and manufacturing. Now, truth be told, I only recently met Phil, but I've known about the quality work he does for a long time. And this whole opportunity came together completely by chance. It all started when I was hunting for shims for this Supra Diff. Everywhere I looked was a dead end, and I was starting to feel the pressure as I promised you guys a diff rebuild in the next episode. Then I called Phil at PDR, told him the problem, and he responded very casually, if we have to, we can just make some. So I sent him a diagram and we got talking. And then came the game changer. If you come down, we'll help you build it.
Oh, we're not far now. Still a shade of green.
So here we are.
Hey Phil, how's it going?
Morning, James. How you going?
Yeah, good mate.
All ready for our day at the bench?
Yeah.
A diff assembly?
Yeah.
No worries.
It's going to be great.
This is Phil, the man behind PDR Differentials. With over 40 years of experience, he knows diffs inside and out. You'll hear more about him throughout the build, but for now, I'll let him introduce himself.
No worries. I've been working in diff shops since I was 19. I'm now 62, so everyone else can do the maths. I've been in my own business for coming up 26 years on April Fool's Day.
What do you mainly do?
We do a lot of four-wheel drive work, which just seems to be, just look around the amount of twin cab four-wheel drives that are on the road now. You just spend lots of time on those. Car repairs, performance guys come in, get their true tracks and their ratio changes.
Yeah, like me.
Good fun, like you, yeah, no worries. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get your Supra and give it a bit of a whirl. And
Cool.
Let's go meet Gary, the guy I'm working with today.
just a bit about Gary. He's been with me for about 6.5 years. Massive into performance, worked at a performance centre. He drives and runs a 2,000 horsepower tow tractor.
Does he?
Yeah,
That's cool.
Picture on the wall there if you want to get a picture of his tow tractor.
Holy moly.
Yeah, so blown alcohol, 504, lemon, la 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 la. Yeah, does the job.
Damn.
And so he's really into his stuff and very good at it too, might I say.
Wow.
So I'm going to leave you with him rather than me trying to bore you to tears. This is Gary, James.
Gary,
G'day,
nice to
how
meet you.
going? Yeah, you too.
I heard all about your tractor. 2,000 horsepower blown alcohol.
Yeah,
Jesus.
love it. Waste of money hobby, but I love it. Makes me think.
All right, time to get to work.
I guess we should start on disassembly. So what we'd often do before we pull it apart is we'll use some marking compound and do a markup on the crown wheel and pinion if the bearings aren't had it.
For those unfamiliar, a markup checks how gears mesh by applying marking compound and then rotating them. This highlights exact contact points, which reveals wear patterns and alignment issues. Since this diff was already stripped, we can't check that now, but Gary will walk us through the process later in the video.
So what would you say about the wear on this crown wheel and pinion?
Right, so we'll have a look at the faces. So that's drive side on this side in this case, and overrun side, so reverse or throttling off. And that looks pretty clean, but what we'll do is we'll set that up and do a markup on it, and I'll show you what I've been looking for.
Cool. I'll be excited to see that.
Pinion, the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's actually, this side's the drive side.
Yeah.
And that looks good. There's no striations or nasties on it.
I'm glad you said that because I've already told the viewers in the last video that I think it's all good.
It looks good so far.
So far?
Yeah, it's all been cleaned up for us, ready to go. I've just gone over it and just made sure there's no big burrs that are going to hold anything out of.
And did you find much?
Oh no, there's a little one where the cup was belted out.
Not today, Junior. Whoops.
Particularly on the side faces with these, because I've got that style of thing with the shim under it, you can sit them cocked a little bit so you get a funny marker. Just on that surface there where the seal goes in, if it's a rubber external, which it's not, it's a steel one, which is good, it can shave the rubber off as you put her in, and just little things like that. Just a bit of prep work to make sure everything goes smooth. What I'll probably do first is wash this up and put it in the hot wash, which will pull it to about 80 degrees, which will expand it so I can get it on the carrier, because it's an interference fit onto that surface.
A quick solvent wash removes oils so the Loctite bonds properly. Then a hot water wash at 80 degrees expands the crown wheel for an easier, precise fit onto the carrier.
So while we've got that in the hot wash, I'll just check this surface and just get rid of any grot, because this is really important that it stays flat, because it stops run out of the crown wheel. So that looks pretty good. This one doesn't have a shim under there because it's got the big one under the cup, which sets your pinion depth.
Pinion depth is adjusted using shims, which can be either placed under the pinion head or under the bearing cup, depending on the design. These shims control how deeply the pinion gear engages with the crown wheel.
Why is setting up the pinion at the right depth so important?
Yep. The most important thing is tooth contact and how that runs. We're looking for a pattern similar to this, and what we do with the pinion depth, we'll shift that from the bottom to the top. So that's too deep with the pinion, and where is it? That's too shallow.
Yeah.
So that is just by changing the pinion depth.
And what are the ramifications if you get the wrong depth?
What it does is it loads the tips of the teeth for a start, either the pinion or the crown wheel, which will weaken it, and it'll be noisy, make heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main thing.
It just means you're going to be replacing that diff or getting it rebuilt sooner.
Yeah, that's one of the big things you see people do. They ignore the marker, one of their biggest mistakes, and don't get it where it should be.
It's the 1%ers that count, right?
Yeah, it does. It really does.
With everything prepped, the next step is pressing the bearing onto the pinion. Gary makes sure to support it from the inner race, so the cage and rollers don't take any unnecessary stress.
That's
awesome.
that one. Beautiful.
Cool. We're rocking and rolling.
Now the fun begins.
Then we could probably set the cup up. So in this case, the shim goes under the cup, so that'll change the depth of the pinion.
Yeah.
So we'll sit that shim in there.
By the way, I apologise about the bash marks on that.
We all do it. Just took the burrs off it, make sure the cup.
Are you just trying to make me feel better?
Yeah, no, we do it ourselves.
Gary's too kind. Now, you'd normally use a metal plate to seat this bearing race, but Gary has a specialised tool.
That's actually a strut rod out of a Commodore, which is actually really soft.
Yeah.
So just sort of get it
So
started.
obviously the bearing race is a really hardened metal.
It's almost tall steel, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's
So when you hit it with something like this,
yeah, that gives.
Yeah.
So I've got to keep grinding that to keep it in good condition. Okay, now that's.
I should have bought the old bearing with this.
Yeah, look, that's what I'll often do. I'll sit the old bearing in and use that as a guide. You'll hear it change. So there it was there.
As Gary puts this diff together, you'll see a mix of small but useful tricks. Some are simple yet handy, while others come from decades of experience.
Start shaving the edges off the punch when it's down.
Right, you were right, and that's a move that I probably wouldn't have been confident to make. You've got to get it millimetre accurate to get it on the edge, otherwise you're going to scratch my race.
Yes, that's why I grind that up so it's got a nice sharp edge on it.
Who needs fancy tools when you can make your own?
Flip it over and you can see down on it. Make sure it's right at home.
God, with the pace that we're going at, Gary, we might even be done by
We might be
lunchtime.
done, you reckon?
Phil was talking
I
about.
didn't, I might get retrenched.
Phil was talking about going to the beach.
I like it.
Next up is the front pinion bearing, which supports the shaft. The process is the same, but this time we are using an old bearing race as a spacer to press it in evenly. And of course, Gary's special tool to make it seat properly.
God, that makes me nervous, but you did it so eloquently.
You're very nice to me.
And it should be home.
Perfection.
Down.
Onto the pinion shaft.
So are we going to have to actually take these shims out to re-shim it
Yes,
again?
that's the worst part. And the worst one is most diffs have the shim in there. So to get that bearing off without hurting it, as you can see, we can't get on that inner race, which is where the strength is. We have to push on the cage.
So what you're trying to say is Toyota made a really good product when they made the Supra?
I love your enthusiasm. Yes, of course, that's right.
I've been trying to throw Gary off his game all day, and I almost got him, but he's too good. Now Gary went on to show me this tool, but I wasn't paying full attention at the time, so I'll have to show you this clip. It's pretty straightforward. First, the tube slides over the pinion shaft and the bottom plate is adjusted to sit against the bearing race. Next, the clamshell clamps around the bearing with the top plate snugged up against the bottom of the pinion bearing for support. Then the cylinder goes around the clamshell and we tighten the bolt to hold it all together. Once that's set, grab a rattle gun, hit the top of the threaded shaft and let it do the work. Once the bearing is free, just reverse the process and voila! Before final assembly, Gary is doing a dummy setup to check the gear mesh. Right now, preload isn't the focus. What matters is getting the pinion depth just right. But why does this step matter so much? I'll let Gary explain.
So the depth will be right, it's just the preload's not going to be right. Because I've got no crushable spacer in there, that's a bit too tight, but it doesn't matter. Because we're just doing a setup.
Okay. And what's the purpose of the setup?
So what we'll do is we'll use that marking compound, which is here, which is yellow marking compound. In the old days they used to use red lead, but of course toxic. So we use that, which is not as good, but it's close. So we'll get a mark up on it and just see if we need to move that pinion in and out to get that mark right.
Okay.
If you do a proper assembly, you've got the seal in and crushable spacer, and if it's wrong, you basically wreck your crushable spacer and have to use a shim on it or something like that, or throw it away and get
That
new.
makes a lot of sense.
With the pinion in place, we're ready to move on to the next step. Now that the crown wheel is up to temperature, it's slightly expanded, making installation onto the carrier a little easier. Even with the heat, aftermarket carriers can be a tight fit, so getting the alignment spot on is key.
Line them up.
Normally, you'd use a soft or copper hammer to avoid bruising the teeth, but Gary's got the experience to get away with it.
Very, very deadly.
She's tight.
Which is good, that's what I want.
That's what we all want.
I don't know what you mean.
We're talking about diffs, right?
We are talking about this. Just because I happen to know what I'm doing with the hammer, I can get away with that.
Perfect.
So you've got to be careful, you'll bruise the teeth if you not know what you're doing with that. Use a copper hammer if you can.
And it's just yet another thing that would make noise on the road, right?
Yes. It'll feel like it'll sound like it's knocking. That's not done up, that's just loose. Get them all started if you can.
These bolts need to be torqued between 60 and 80 foot-pounds, tight enough to hold firm but not overdone. And yes, I know how this looks, but Gary's done this 1,000 times with this rattle gun and knows exactly where it needs to be. If you're going to do this at home though, a torque wrench is the way to go.
Some differentials have a shim under here, which is a fair pain because to adjust it you've got to keep pulling the bearings off. So we use a setup bearing which has got the centre ground out of it, so you can pull them off and on and off. But in this case, Toyota have been kind to us and we've got shims that run on the plates that push the bearing on there.
Thanks, Toyota.
Yeah.
Shimming methods vary between differentials, and some can be a real pain. In some setups, like Gary mentioned, the shims sit behind the carrier bearings, meaning you have to press the bearings on and off just to make adjustments. Other designs, like a Dana 60, let you swap shims out without pulling the bearings, but you still have to remove the carrier every time. Toyota has made life easier. The shims sit outside the bearings so we can fine-tune preload and backlash without removing a thing. Way more convenient.
Most bearings you've got to keep the cup and cone together. Timken and the good quality bearings you can actually, they say that they can run any cup on any cone. So That's pretty cool.
With most bearings, it's critical to keep the cup and cone matched. They wear together over time, forming a perfect contact pattern. Swapping them out can cause uneven wear, noise, or even premature failure. Some high quality brands like Timken claim their bearings are interchangeable, but for the best longevity and performance, it's always safest to run a set that match. Now with the bearings pressed onto the carrier, everything should be coming together. Or so we thought.
Why is that bearing up there? I might just... Phil, have you got a moment? Yep.
This doesn't look good.
It's got a very short journal, hasn't it?
Very short journal.
Here's the issue. While the bearing is fully seated against the carrier, the journal itself is too short, leaving part of the bearing unsupported. Normally, you'd expect the journal to match the full width of the bearing for proper support. So now, the big question is this how it's meant to be, or do we have a problem?
Just measure from the bearing seat to the bearing seat.
Yeah.
And just check it with the...
Haven't got the old carrier.
old carrier.
Oh, I should have brought that.
No, that's all right.
Well, the only thing is suck it and see.
Yes, I think.
Whack the other bearing on and like these very technical terms we use, suck it and see, whack it on. It's never like that.
What Phil means by suck it and see is that we're going to fully assemble the carrier, press the second bearing on, install the bearing races into the side plates, and measure the overall width. That'll tell us if this aftermarket carrier was designed with a shorter journal or if we have an issue. But before we check those measurements, Phil thought we should take a look at the instructions.
They're already in the bin, Gary.
Yeah. It's hard to get good help. There you go, you can have a read.
While checking the diagrams, since neither of us can read Japanese, Phil pointed out the adjustability of this diff and how it all works.
Actually, this is interesting though.
A few moments later.
That's plate stacking in the limited slip. So the different ways you stack the plates gives you more or less limited slip effect. Cool. So they're like fully adjustable. So they've also got these drivers here have got ramps, and you hear them talk about one-way, two-way LSD. Yeah. So it's all about, it's 1.5, it's all about the angle of the ramps. So if you're racing the car, you can actually modify them to suit your driving requirements.
Phil explains this perfectly, but before we get too technical, let's just take a step back and break down how a differential works and why an LSD like this makes such a difference. In a standard open differential, power always takes a path of least resistance. This means if one wheel loses traction, all the power goes to that wheel, leaving the other wheel with zero drive. This is where a limited slip differential comes in. An LSD helps distribute power more evenly, sending torque to the wheel with more grip. This keeps the car stable and allows it to put the power down more effectively, but not all LSDs behave the same. This Cusco unit is a clutch type LSD. The key advantage of this design is its adjustability. You can set it as a one-way, a 1.5 way, or a two-way diff, depending on how you want the car to respond. So what's the difference? A one-way LSD locks under acceleration as the cam moves up the ramp, engaging the clutch plates. On deceleration, the flat edge prevents engagement, keeping things smooth. A 1.5 way LSD locks on acceleration like a one-way, but also partially engages under braking. The shallower ramp angle on the deceleration side helps stabilize the car when slowing into corners, reducing sudden oversteer or understeer. A two-way LSD locks on both acceleration and deceleration, with equal ramp angles in both directions. This gives maximum control, making it ideal for drifting and more aggressive cornering. Phil pointed out that ramp angles control how aggressively the diff locks. Steeper ramp angles engage faster, while shallower ones smooth it out. And since this diff is fully adjustable, you can swap out the cam chips to fine-tune its response. Lockup can also be adjusted by adding or removing clutch plates, changing how much force is needed to engage. And since it's fully rebuildable, it's a cost-effective long-term option, especially for track use.
It's very customizable.
For a circuit car, handling, throttling off into a corner, that'd be amazing.
It is, two ways great, because you get trail braking, so the car brakes itself, so you don't have to go as heavy onto the brakes into a corner. Then you get through the corner and you jump on the gas again, and basically it'll drive both wheels and it'll spear you out the corner. So your cornering becomes better. All the race drivers out there will bloom and jump on top of me because I'm not a race driver, but that's technically speaking how that limited slip will work. And it's really good.
Now, a quick tip from Gary before we put this thing together.
Sometimes this plug's quite difficult to get at with exhausts and different things in there, and you go to undo it and you put a heap of pressure and it doesn't come undone. Just a little trick over the years, I would normally just give that, but carefully, that doesn't look careful, and then it compresses the gasket and it comes off easy, because we see these plugs chewed out all the time because people are trying to go for it. Just a tiny tap compresses that aluminium washer or crushable washer. It comes undone easy.
Yep.
Sometimes you hit it and it comes undone with your fingers.
That's a cool trick. Now, it's been a few minutes, but don't forget, we were still unsure if this journal's length would throw off the fit. So now it's time to test the overall width and see if everything lines up.
The moment of truth here.
Yeah, you got to get that in somehow. They're all a bit, that won't go in like that. These bearings are going to make it interesting for us.
But just when we thought we were on track, we ran into something we didn't expect.
Righto, I'll have a look.
We'll try crown wheel in first.
All right, usually it hits the pinion and it won't let us do it, but you could be right.
Maybe I am.
Yep. And no, because those bearings, it might be the bearings, it might be the case. I'm not sure. Philip?
Oh.
At this point, doubts are creeping in. Did I order the wrong diff? Are the bearings wrong? Will I even have a video to share with you guys? While I'm quietly stressing, these guys are calmly discussing the next step. But like with any good diagnosis, you have to get closer to knowing what the problem is before you can have a solid solution.
That is cool. Oh.
Easy.
So how are we going to get the bearings?
I know. How are we going to get the bearings? Let me think.
Could you put the
I'm
whole
pretty
diff?
confident of that original gear set in the original case, because the case can be machined different and the crown wheel and pinion can be machined within a tolerance, and quite often on a lot of crown wheel and pinions they've got it marked on the top, plus or minus 1 or 2 or whatever, and that's for setup. In this case, because the carrier is aftermarket, it's not fitting in the case very well, so we'd have to, I'm thinking, one way around it, if you'd let me, would be to chuck that either in the lathe and just take a chamfer off that shoulder. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because it's just a fraction thicker there compared to the cast type original. But in this case, I can shortcut it by setting that pinion up properly so I don't have to pull it out, because once I get that in there, to get that bearing off without hurting it is not easy, because I can't get that puller inside the hole.
Yes.
So we can take a gamble on each way, and I'm pretty confident with this setup. The carrier might shift the crown wheel in and out this way, but we can solve that with the side shims easily. So I might run it past my boss, who's an absolute whiz at diagnostics, so I'll be back in a second. Two things I was thinking is we've got the original case, original gear set.
Yeah.
Pretty much I'm assuming pinion depth would be close.
It will be, yeah.
So I could either set that pinion up in a finished state, put that in, put the bearing on, and then I only have to muck around with shims.
Shims, yeah.
Or for future use, because he's got that much power, he's going to smash something.
Yeah.
We could just chamfer that shoulder off.
I think we should chamfer the shoulder, because you want to be able to get it in and out with the bearing on.
Well, that's good, because I can put that in the chuck, put a centre in it, and just do it
always
on the lathe.
It's easy enough to do it that way, but my motto is you always got to think about the next guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they do, they look at something like that and they go, what the hell did they do there?
Yeah.
And if it's simple as getting it in the lathe and taking the chamfer off there,
because it's not going to be easy to get out.
No, it won't be. You won't get it out.
To get that bearing out of that hole,
you won't get it out, and
like,
you can even machine.
You'd have to have a pretty good puller.
You can machine a little bit off there if you need to.
Yeah, righto.
It looks like someone's already shaved. Is that a factory shave?
That's a factory shave.
That's a factory cut.
And it's done both sides.
I would say this is the problem.
Yeah.
The original must have gone in, so I reckon we'll take that off.
Yeah,
yes?
No worries. Yeah.
All right, I'll go and do that.
Just give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
The bearing's missing. It's all right. No worries. Yeah, no, it's all right.
Actually, that was very smart, Phil, because without the bearings on, is that why they got a short journal? You can put it straight in.
Oh, you could put it straight in.
And put the bearings on after with a two-legged style puller.
what through here.
Mm.
Jeez, it'd be bloody awful.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? You'd have to have
Disgusting.
very good.
Disgustingly awful.
I reckon that.
Yeah, I reckon.
Lave's not going to hurt that.
Machine
That's
that.
not a strength area.
No, machine that's fine.
All right, I'll be back.
Cool. Off to the lathe.
After the lave.
Watching these guys talk through a problem that, to the untrained eye, has a dozen possible variables and calmly landing on a solution was not just impressive, it was a bit of a relief.
Oh, wow.
This is an eye opener. This
Oh,
baby.
wow. Look at the size of this
We
thing.
just have a little lave.
Oh, my God. Just a little one, Gary.
Just a little. You don't want things too big because they can
No.
be bulky.
While I was still laughing about the size of this thing, Gary was already in the zone, lining it up, clamping it down, and getting everything ready for the cut.
Oh, wow.
Not bad.
It's even got a clutch.
It's got a clutch. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think we'll bring her in and just take a little cut off.
Here we go.
Probably chrome molly or something. It'll heat up. Wonder how much we need.
One quick check before Gary finishes it off with a file, and we are done. Let's hope this works.
Have a look at that.
Oh,
Beautiful. That's what we
Genius.
So that's great. That was just enough.
In the end, it only needed the tiniest amount taken off. But without a lathe on hand, that small job could have turned into a major holdup. Safe to say, we dodged a bullet there. With the carrier finally dropping in, we can move on to installing the shims. Most setups like this put the thicker shim on the crown wheel side, but checking the backlash and doing a markup will confirm if we're in the ballpark.
That's not too bad.
so hang on. You just
Yeah.
put your hand on there
Yep.
and measured the backlash.
Yes.
And you said it's not too bad.
Yeah, you get a bit of an
How
idea.
can you do that?
Number one, it actually has got clearance. So you can hear that audibly, but you probably can't see it because my hand's moving a lot and it's not. Usually what I'll do is I'll have some feel when I do them up how much crush they've got on the bearings.
Yes.
So for example, a Toyota or a Nissan and we'll use a screw to tighten that up. So you'll feel that tension as you come up. First job, dial indicator.
All right.
So that's about 5 thou roughly. We're
Oh, yeah.
looking for perhaps a fraction more, but what we'll do is see where the markup is because a tight backlash like that will show up in the markup.
Backlash, which you may know, is the small gap between the crown wheel and the pinion teeth. Too tight and it causes noise or heat. Too loose and it feels sloppy. But it also affects the gear pattern. If the backlash is too tight, the drive side mark will often sit too low. So before we make any changes, we need to check the pattern to see how it's really meshing.
So I'll put some marking compound, and someone that's nice and neat will only put it on 3 teeth and do a nice neat job with that. So what we want to do is load that just to make it do a better mark. All that is just like CRC,
Yep.
just to make it mark up easier.
Interesting.
So I might go that way
That's
first.
cool. It's a good trick.
And then I'm going to put preload on it. So I'm pushing it one way and making resistance on the pinion. So I'm going to turn that around and I'm going to go back the other way too, resisting that. And a lot of times I'll just do it. I'll do it again to get a different tooth. That's so hard to turn because I've got a lot of
I can
preload
see
on.
those marks coming
Righto.
up. Do you want me as an unexperienced person to tell you what?
Very much so. So
I-
that's drive side,
Yeah.
so under acceleration.
Okay.
So that's the
I
first
think it's
pattern we're looking at.
probably running too low.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So what we've got, if you call it toe and heel, and if I was remembering which one's which, because I don't have to remember anymore, yeah, I think that's toe and that's heel, but it doesn't matter for what we're doing. Most of the concentration of the mark is on the inside, and we pretty much want it towards the middle. Depending on the wear of the gear set can change that, but that's because we haven't got enough backlash. So what I can do now is give it a little bit more backlash and show you the changes that makes.
Okay.
That's drive side. So now we're going to look at overrun, because often if it's a worn gear set, it'll be quite a mismatch between one and the other.
That looks
That's
quite
more, that's a better mark for what we're looking for. So
Ooh.
that'll be interesting. So it's not too bad. It's
Yeah, okay.
That's pretty good. So the pinion depth, as we thought with the original shim, is extremely close. So I'm really happy with that. I'd just like to give it a bit more. So what we can do is there was only about 10 thou difference between those two shims. I get it, so I can just pull them out, and because we're using good quality bearings, we can swap the cup and cone match up and just swap them over. So that's made life really easy for me.
Alright, quick recap. Backlash came in a little tight at 5 thou. When we checked the contact pattern with marking compound, the pinion depth looked good, but the drive side was low. Now 2 things stand out. First, you probably guess we need to open the backlash slightly to shift the drive side contact pattern up. And second, when the drive and coast patterns are far apart, it can mean the gear set's too worn to reuse. But Gary reckons this one's fine, and I trust his call. So the next step is to swap the shim plates side to side. So while Gary does that, Phil is going to share a great way to remember which direction to go when you're trying to chase the perfect pattern.
So a crown wheel tooth, if you imagine a whole lot of people holding hands, standing in a circle, their toes are pointing towards the inside. So the toe of the tooth's on the inside, the heel of the tooth's on the outside, then you got the face of the tooth at the top, and the flank of the tooth at the bottom. The golden rule for diff assembly, and I was taught this when I was an apprentice like many years ago, is face and flank move the crank, toe and heel move the wheel. So that means face and flank, so if the mark's up or down, you move the crank, which is the pinion.
Yeah.
Or toe and heel, if the move, so what Gary's trying to achieve now is more backlash to stretch that mark up towards the heel of the tooth. So toe and heel, move the wheel.
Huh.
There you go.
That's a good way to remember it.
Yep, that's right. I was taught the same way. I just forget things.
Alright, time to see what moving those shims changes.
I can hear that's a little bit more already.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's got way too much.
Yes, way too
Is that
much.
15 thou, is it? Or 14 or...
Yeah, 15 thou. Yep.
So now, let's see what that extra 10 thou backlash does for the contact pattern.
You can see how it's brought it right up this end. So for a high-powered car, that's not great because it'll run right off the tooth. In a street application, you could get away with that, but it is out of tolerance.
What Gary's referring to is gear deflection under load. In high-powered applications, torque can force the gears apart just enough to shift the contact pattern towards the heel. If the pattern is already near the edge, it can run off the tooth entirely, concentrating load on a small area, which increases the risk of chipping or surface fatigue. So now that we've seen how much that pattern shifted, it's time to dial it back in, and that starts with finding the right shims.
And I want 2 or 3 thou thicker shim than that. So I'll go find a shim and I'll be back.
Too easy.
Might be a channel.
My goodness, there's a lot there.
Yes, we've got a lot of shims, but...
I might just get back to you when you've found a shim.
Yeah, that might be there.
Finding a shim in Gary's collection, you could say, was nearly shim possible.
Yep. That's the joke I went with. That's the one. Anyway, Gary's got a solution. 2 shims stacked on top of each other. I think it's going to do the trick.
So you've got to be a bit careful with thin shims. They will split, particularly on the pinion. The forces are amazing. I've seen them just crush out. So in this case, side shim, we can get away with sort of 5 thou shims and less. But on the pinion, I wouldn't go under sort of a 10 thou shim.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that looks nice and neat in there too.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
With Gary confident these shims will give us a good markup, it's time to move on with the assembly. Before we get into it, Gary is going to share his thoughts on setting preload using a crushable spacer and why, even with all the debate around solid spacers, he still backs the factory setup.
We're happy with the pinion depth, so we'll set that up with the crushable spacer. There's a lot of talk about solid spacers nowadays. Has been for a long time, particularly in full drives. Everything I say is open for debate. A solid spacer will have a bit more surface area on the race, but the forces are out on the outside of the race anyway, so I don't see there's much of an advantage with that. The only reason I think a solid spacer could be a good thing, particularly in full driving, is you can do the nut tighter, which can help things from stop moving around. Other than that, I'm not sold on solid spacers at all.
Okay. So these ones, I would imagine, have a bit of give and they're a little bit flexible.
Yep.
So they accommodate for like all sorts of driving styles. Do you think that'd be a fair assumption to make?
I'll show you something. So there's what the bearings look like. So there's your 2 tapers. So when you've got the power on, that's trying to push that bearing in. That's why it's got the taper that direction. When you throttle off, it's still pushing it in, but in that transition period, it can float. So what the crushable spacer does, if you didn't have that in there, which they've tried, a bit like a wheel bearing on a car, you do that up to a certain tension, but it's not very tight. So that holds the bearings apart, so the contact points are at a certain tension. So therefore, the forces on those bearings are outwards, not trying to crush the crushable spacer. That's why in position, the crushable spacer doesn't crush. And when people say, oh, the crushable spacer's collapsed, what's actually happened is your rollers and the cups are worn, allowing it to be loose.
Yes.
So what happens when that wears is your nut loses the tension on it, and your nut can sit there vibrating even though it's staked, and eventually wear and feel loose.
That makes total sense.
So everyone comes up and says, oh, the nut's loose, we'll just tighten her up, but your bearings are already worn.
Yes.
So tightening it up will give you can be lucky and you get a few more, thousands of Ks out of it.
Yeah.
But usually your bearings are on the way out when you have to tighten the nut.
It's just like a Band-Aid fix.
It is. It is a Band-Aid fix.
All right, with the theory out of the way, it's time to get this done. This part might look simple, but it's one of the most delicate steps in the whole build.
So with this, you just make sure your splines are good fit on your pinion. We know that is because we hadn't hit it on before.
Yes.
That surface where your seal runs, tiny mark there.
I did notice that.
But nah, look, the seals are pretty forgiving, and usually I try and run them in a new spot. You can run fine emery over them.
Yep.
And just take any spots over. Because it's a flexible rubber seal, it will handle some groove, but you don't want much.
With this part checked, Gary gives it a quick clean and lines up the seal.
That's beautiful there. So that's
always
good.
an important step.
Yes.
A bit of rubber grease helps it slide in without damage, and as always, there's a detail here worth paying attention to.
I just use a cup that runs on the shoulder so I get the depth right. Yeah. Usually the depth is very important. A lot of diffs though, you can move that a little bit. If you've got a bad wear mark and you want to shift it, you can.
Where would you look usually like this?
That's got really good contact right around that seal. So it's full contact of the outside surface of the seal, and it allows that little flange. If I didn't have a bearing in there, I could show you, but see how that runs below that surface? So we've got to make sure that it doesn't hit on that flange.
Gary adds a light smear of silicone to the splines that stops the oil from leaking out the flange under pressure. Once that's done, the flange or yoke, depending on what you want to call it, goes in. And because it's an interference fit, it needs a light tap to seat properly. Then a small amount of Loctite goes on the threads, but not too much, since too much can make preload hard to gauge.
That's it already. So, see, we've got that. That's what the crushable space is holding on us.
To preload the bearings, we clamp the diff in a vise and use a bar to hold the yoke steady while Gary tightens up the pinion nut. This part takes feel. You are crushing the spacer little by little, feeling for just the right resistance.
Holy moly. See, we've got heaps. I'd normally use a great big bar on it.
We only get one shot with this spacer, so we have to make it a good one. As it's crushed incrementally between the two tapered bearings, the end float is removed. Beyond that, the goal is to apply just enough tension to hold the bearings tight without overloading them. Gary explains if the preload is too loose, the pinion can shift under load, shifting the contact pattern of the crown wheel and pinion up and off the tooth, which, as we now know, can break a tooth. Too much tension on the bearings and we can create excessive heat that will prematurely wear the bearings out. So how do we know how tight to do the nut?
We've got to be really careful because it can come up really quick if you're close.
So ultimately, preload will be measured with a tool like this. But what you're about to see is way more important. Gary's going to show you a method to accurately set preload on practically any differential, minus any overly fancy tools, except maybe this one.
Oh, that's actually a strut rod out of a Commodore.
Nice.
How's that feel for now? Is it stiff to move and then goes easy?
Yes.
A bit more. So there's a lot of feel involved, and this is where the bit of black magic comes in with differential building.
I'll try my best to explain the feeling we're looking for, since the audio when Gary explained it wasn't the best. With all the end float gone, we're chasing something much more subtle, a kind of smooth, consistent drag as you spin the pinion. Just at that point where resistance starts to come in. If I had to give you an analogy, I'd say it's like a new tap. It'll move smoothly even with a flick. but it won't free spin.
Odd example, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you're doing it. Try it out.
That's starting to get nice.
Yeah,
You've got seal tension as well. That's the only thing. So you want to take any load that's, if it's not seated properly, so that just seats any bearings and things like that.
After Gary gives it a tap, all the preload disappears, going from a smooth drag to almost a free spin. And there's a few reasons for that.
The cups aren't exactly in, that just bounces them in. The rollers, because the cage is floating, can sort of bind up, everything binds up, and they're just that movement there, tapping it, unloads all that.
And it allows you to gauge more accurately where you're at.
And it's really important.
Yeah.
Because you can premature where you're bearing, it makes super amount of heat. So that's starting to get real nice. You have a feel of that.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Gary's going to unload the bearings one more time, just to reassess. Then he's going to get a little bit more specific to my situation.
So this is where it gets a bit tricky.
It's starting to feel good still.
Yeah, that's it. That's not bad. That's seal tension as well. Most cars, I'd say that's pretty good. Look, I'm just thinking if you're going to run in the hundreds, as in 800 horsepower, is that what we're going to run straight up?
Yeah, probably close to that.
Yeah.
We might have a run-in period of that because the engine's still not running yet.
Yeah, that's super close. I might just a micro bit more because that's holding those bearings in mesh with the cut and cone.
Yeah.
Which is stopping the pinion move away. So with huge forces, the bearing will slide up the cap and let your teeth come out of mesh.
Yes.
And then they break, of course. So we want to limit that as much as we can. That's nearly nothing. But you can tell that's perfect now. I'm happy with that.
Well, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you guys got something out of this section because I definitely did. And I wouldn't have actually known to do it like this. And this is where the experience is really starting to come in when we're talking about reassembling the diff.
All right.
Now at this point, you're probably thinking, James, why didn't you put a preload tension tool on the diff and check for the 8.7 to 13.9 inch-pounds that the factory calls for? Well, that's a good question. And the short answer is, this isn't a factory setup. And there's a bit of an art to this. With the right experience, you can make those critical decisions based on feel, which at a certain level can be more accurate than chasing a number.
And hey, if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments.
But I might just dummy assemble it one more time just to see how we're going on carrier preload and backlash.
Gary gets the carrier back in and starts tapping the shims in so we can measure carrier preload, which is basically how tight the center sits between the bearings. But I'd been giving Gary a bit of grief all morning, so this is where he decided to throw a shot back.
In the mechanic game, if you can't get it with a hammer, you get a bigger hammer.
Do you think that we're that inaccurate? Come on.
Maybe that's a farmer thing.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
think it is.
Maybe.
Oh, spanner jockey.
Listen to this guy.
What do you mean I'm from the country?
I mean, the tractor gave it away, but
Yeah, I think it's pretty redneck.
the 2,000 horsepower thing was a bit of a shock.
Right, preload. With the correct shims on both sides, one side torqued down fully and the other side free with the bearings sitting on the rollers, Gary uses a feeler gauge between the plate and the housing to check the gap and get a feel for how much preload we're working with.
Now we've got a fair bit of preload going on there, which is good.
Okay.
So
Can you explain how you've worked out the preload just by doing that?
Initially, I just did that by feel, a bit like the pinion. I could tell once I did that up how the backlash feels on that carrier. So if you wriggle that carrier now before I do these bolts up, and I'll do these bolts up and we'll have another feel. Originally, I was taught that you can set up a wheel with string around it so many times and the old-fashioned like fishing spring scale, hook it on and pull it at a certain rate and you can get a pounds per inch force on your bearing preload and you can literally do a test.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned originally, which gives you the feel. That's probably on the tight side.
Yes.
But they're quite a big bearing.
And again, you're just that's by feel
that's
that you're...
by feel. So I know that's really on the high side of what we've got there, and that's interesting. I can't wait to see what backlash that is.
Now the way we're setting up carrier preload here works great on a shim-based diff like mine, but there are a few other common setups. On some diffs, like a Ford 9-inch, you've got threaded side adjusters instead of shims. You preload the bearings by winding the adjusters in and check it by rotating the centre, feeling for drag, or by using a torque wrench on the yoke. But the goal's always the same. Clamp the bearings tight enough to hold everything in place under load without creating too much heat or resistance.
I'm hoping we've gone to 6. Oh my goodness, have a look at that. I'll roll it over. If I was a good person, I would wash that face off.
Looks like you're a good person, Gary.
Oh well. Can you read it, or is it?
I can read it. Yeah.
What do we got?
7. Or maybe even 8.
I can zero it.
Yeah, zero it again.
About 7?
Hang on. Yeah.
Where do you want me to
Go, yep.
That
Yeah,
way?
yeah, it's nearly 7.
That's lovely. That's really good. That's right on spec. So we'll do a markup on that now. That preload's right up on the high side. But for what you're doing, if you're prepared to just do that little drive, let it cool down, and go for another drive,
Yes.
the bearings will be good. Okay.
Let's see.
Let's see. Feels lovely. No, that's perfect.
Oh, yeah. It even sounds
Yeah,
nice.
sweet. And that's funny you say that, because if I've got that fairway out of spec, it will be grr, grr,
Yeah.
or a hiss noise or something when you're turning it over. And look at that. That is magnificent. So it's
Yes.
longer. So the mark's longer
Yeah.
on this side.
It's
and
right on
how's
the money.
overrun? Overrun's still good.
Yes.
So that side's still in spec.
Let's look at the other side.
And that's
Oh,
not bad.
yeah.
And what we've
That
got
looks good.
is a tail with a tiny curve, like a moon. It's slowly curving this way,
Yeah.
which means the pinion's in a couple of thou more than a square thing. So that's as strong as you can get it, because
Yes.
what happens is under load, it will straighten up.
Yes.
It'll get rid of that moon shape and go square because it's coming apart. So
Yeah.
that's perfect. I love that. That's great.
We are into final assembly now, but don't switch off just yet. There's still a few things worth seeing, including something at the end that really meant a lot to me. First, Gary removes the side plates to install the axle seals, along with the O-ring that seals the plates to the diff housing. Then he adds a bit of rubber grease to help the axles slide in smoothly. After checking the housing for any burrs, the side plates are tapped back into place, and with a bit of Loctite on each bolt, they're tightened and checked by hand. Next, Gary preps the short axles, and he's got a handy tip to share about that.
You'll have a lot of trouble sometimes getting these in because you circlip. So what I tend to do is center the circlip, and to center it, I'll put a bit of grease there, push the circlip towards it and let it run over it.
Yep.
And that'll put a bit of grease under that surface, which holds it in the middle, so your tips of your circlip aren't sticking out.
With the axles prepped, Gary slides them into the differential housing. A few gentle taps, and they're in. Next, we apply a silicone seal to the back of the diff housing. Place the housing plate back on, and add a bit of Loctite to the bolts before tightening them up. And with those final touches, our diff is complete. With the diff finally together, we all took some time to chat. And you know what? These guys are some of the most honest, down-to-earth people I've ever met. I honestly feel humbled that Phil gave me this opportunity, because it would have been easy for him to say, "No, sorry mate, we just don't have time for that." But their support made all the difference. I could not have imagined a better outcome, or a better couple of blokes to build this diff with.
I've been mechanicking for 40 years, and I still enjoy differentials. Dirty, smelly, heavy, but still enjoy doing them.
So do I.
It's good.
Strange. I always say, I love doing the job.
Yeah.
I'll be here on my own in the quiet, no phone, no nothing, and I'll be putting something together on the bench, and I'll go, God, I could just do this all day.
That sounds great.
I know it sounds a little bit punsy, but it's just
No.
it is just
Yeah.
the way I could just do that.
Yeah.
I love it.
You go and turn your diff over now and see what feeling it gives you.
Oh. Wow.
Isn't that silky?
Yeah, it's silky smooth. I really feel honoured that this been built here, and yeah, I can't wait to get it back in the car, and I can't wait to see it run.
No worries.
Done.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Easy. Thanks.
Beautiful.
Man. That was
No
great.
worries.
With everything wrapped up, I waited while Phil finished with the customer, so I could settle up the score.
All right, Phil. What do I owe you, man?
Nothing.
What?
No, nothing, because it's just been a good experience today. Thank
Seriously?
you. You've come down, you've shown some interest.
I got to give you something.
No,
This.
no. It's all good.
Wow.
Way to go.
Are you sure?
This is how you start building a rapport with somebody.
Yeah.
You just do it. You're interested, you've got a passion for what you do, and I think that's marvellous.
Well,
Because
thank
there's
you.
not enough of it these days.
Yeah.
So, yeah, more than happy to let
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't expect
you.
that.
No worries at all.
And I said that before we started this, I'd just pay you for every hour labour,
Yeah.
even while we were talking, because I've
No.
made you guys
No,
talk
that's
on
okay.
camera and do things that you
Yeah,
normally.
no, that's all right. We'll just have a look
Wow.
at them and have a look
Thank
at the
you.
finished product, and that'll be great.
Yeah, I can't wait to show you.
Yeah, because we get so much work here, we don't advertise. And to do stuff like this, to be, yeah, you're a businessman, you understand the expense of doing stuff, but it's worth its weight.
Well, I hope this video can serve you well.